The dress she wore had once been fine, blue calico with delicate white flowers along the hem, purchased 3 years ago for her cousin's wedding in Boston. Now it hung loose on her frame, stained with 6 weeks of hard travel, the hem torn and muddied from walking through settlements that had no use for a woman alone. Clara Bennett stood on the wooden platform in the center of Denver City's main square and tried to remember who she had been before this moment. A teacher's daughter, a woman of education and refinement, someone who had read Shakespeare by candlelight and debated philosophy with her father over breakfast. Now she was lot number 7. The auctioneer, a round man with tobacco-stained teeth named Cornelius Fletcher, shuffled through his papers without looking at her. To him, she was no different from the bolts of fabric or the farming equipment that would be sold later that afternoon. Merchandise, inventory, a problem to be processed and moved along. September 1883. The Rocky Mountain Matrimonial Agency, they called it. A polite name for selling desperate women to desperate men in a territory where females were scarce and wives were needed. Clara had learned quickly that the frontier had no patience for euphemism. Out here everything was exactly what it appeared to be, and what she appeared to be was a woman with no options left. The crowd gathered before the platform was mostly men, miners with calloused hands and hungry eyes, ranchers seeking someone to cook and clean and warm their beds. A few older gentlemen who looked respectable enough, though Clara had learned that appearances meant nothing. Some of the cruelest people she had ever known had worn the finest clothes. She kept her spine straight and her chin lifted. If she was going to be sold like livestock, she would at least maintain her dignity. Her father had taught her that much. A person's worth is not determined by their circumstances, Clara. It is determined by how they conduct themselves within those circumstances. Her father, Professor William Bennett of Harvard University. A man who had believed in the power of education, in the equality of all minds, in the radical notion that his daughter deserved the same intellectual opportunities as any son. He had died when she was 15, leaving behind a mountain of debt and a widow who followed him to the grave 2 years later. After that, Clara had become a burden, a mouth to feed, an obligation that her Uncle James accepted with visible reluctance and constant reminders of his generosity. She had worked as an unpaid governess to his children, teaching them to read and write, while her aunt looked down her nose at the poor relation who ate at their table. When Uncle James announced his plan to move west and seek his fortune in the territories, Clara had no choice but to follow. A woman alone in Boston had few options, and none of them appealed to her. Perhaps the frontier would offer something different. Perhaps she could find work as a teacher, establish herself, build a life on her own terms. Then Uncle James died of cholera in Independence, Missouri, 2 weeks into the journey. Aunt Martha had waited exactly 1 day before informing Clara that there was no room for extra mouths to feed. She had left her at the trading post with nothing but the clothes on her back and the words that still echoed in her mind. "You should have died instead of him. At least he was useful." Clara had survived by doing laundry and mending clothes, sleeping in stables, and eating whatever scraps she could find. She had walked for days, hitched rides on wagons, done whatever was necessary to keep moving west, because stopping meant dying, and she was not ready to die. Not yet. Not like this. The Rocky Mountain Matrimonial Agency had found her in a boarding house in Denver City, too weak from hunger to refuse their offer. They would feed her, clothe her, give her a place to sleep. In exchange, she would stand on this platform and let men bid for the right to call her wife. It was not the future she had imagined, but it was a future, and that was more than she had possessed yesterday. Fletcher cleared his throat and began his pitch, his voice carrying across the square with practiced ease. Lot number 7, Clara Bennett, 24 years of age, originally from Boston, Massachusetts, educated, literate, capable of managing a household, teaching children, keeping accounts, no family, no prospects, no previous marriage. He paused, letting his gaze sweep across the crowd before adding the words that made Clara's stomach turn. Virtue guaranteed. A murmur ran through the assembled men. Clara forced herself not to react, though her cheeks burned with humiliation. This was the part that mattered most to them, apparently, not her education or her skills, not the years she had spent studying literature and languages, not her ability to discuss Plato or calculate compound interest. No. What mattered was that she had never been touched by a man. The bidding started at $50. $50. The price of a good horse. The price of 6 weeks of her labor. The price of everything she was and everything she might become. A miner in the front row raised his hand. $60. Clara studied him, thick-bodied and rough-featured with a gold tooth that caught the sunlight when he grinned. He looked at her the way a dog looks at a bone, something to be consumed and forgotten. An older rancher countered, $75. He was perhaps 60, with a belly that strained against his vest and eyes that lingered too long on her figure. Clara felt her skin crawl. $80, the miner called out. $90, the rancher replied. They went back and forth, driving the price up in $5 increments, while Clara stood motionless, watching her future being decided by men she had never met. Neither of them had spoken to her. Neither of them cared what she thought or wanted. She was merchandise, and merchandise did not have opinions. The bidding stalled at $100. The miner shook his head and stepped back, muttering about city girls not being worth the trouble. The rancher smiled, revealing teeth stained brown from chewing tobacco. Clara's heart sank. Fletcher opened his mouth to call the sale complete when a commotion at the edge of the crowd drew everyone's attention. People were moving, not walking but actively stepping aside, clearing a path for someone approaching the platform. The movement rippled through the assembled bodies like a stone dropped in still water, and Clara found herself leaning forward to see who could command such an instinctive reaction. Then she saw him. He was the largest man she had ever encountered, tall enough that he seemed to blot out the sun, with shoulders so broad they could fill a doorway. He wore a coat made of animal hide, worn and weathered from years of use, and his dark hair fell past his shoulders in a way that marked him as something other than civilized. But it was his face that held her attention, or rather, what she could see of it beneath the thick beard that covered most of his features. High cheekbones, a nose that had been broken at least once, and eyes the color of storm clouds fixed on her with an intensity that made her breath catch in her throat. Those eyes. They did not look at her like the miner had with base hunger. They did not look at her like the rancher had with calculated assessment. They looked at her like they were seeing something no one else could see, something hidden beneath the surface. Whispers erupted around her. "That is Elijah Stone." Stone. I thought he died up in those mountains years ago. 8 years he has been gone. Why would he come down now? Clara filed away the information. Elijah Stone. A name that meant something to these people, though she could not imagine what. He looked like he had stepped out of a different century entirely, a man from a time before towns and laws and polite society. He stopped in front of the platform, and the crowd gave him a wide berth. Even Fletcher seemed unsettled, his jovial manner faltering as he faced the newcomer. "Mr. Stone, what brings you down from your mountain?" "Elijah?" Stone did not answer Fletcher. His gaze remained fixed on Clara, studying her with an intensity that should have frightened her. Instead, she found herself straightening her spine even further, meeting his stare with all the dignity she could muster. She was not afraid. She had survived too much to be afraid of a man, no matter how large he was. $100, Stone said. His voice was deep and rough, like gravel being crushed beneath a boot. He did not raise it, did not shout the bid the way the others had. He simply spoke, and somehow everyone heard. The rancher sputtered. 110. Stone's expression did not change. 150. Silence fell over the crowd. $150 was more than most of these men earned in several months. It was more than Clara had ever seen in one place. The rancher's face reddened with anger, but he shook his head and stepped back. He was not going to pay that much for any woman. Fletcher recovered his composure. $150 from Mr. Elijah Stone. Do I hear 160? Nothing? The crowd remained silent. 150 going once, going twice. Fletcher's gavel came down with a crack that echoed across the square. Sold. The word hit Clara like a physical blow. Sold. She had been sold. Whatever happened next, whatever this strange man wanted from her, she was now legally bound to him for the terms of their contract. Stone approached the platform and reached into his coat. He withdrew a leather pouch and tossed it to Fletcher without looking, his attention still fixed on Clara. "Her belongings," he said. "Where are they?" Clara forced herself to speak, though her voice came out smaller than she would have liked. "I do not have any." "Nothing. Everything I owned was lost on the journey here." For a long moment Stone said nothing. Then he nodded once, a single sharp movement. "Follow me." He turned and walked away, the crowd parting before him like the Red Sea before Moses. Clara stared at his retreating back, frozen in place. Fletcher cleared his throat. "Well, go on then. You belong to him now." The words sent a chill down her spine, but Clara gathered what remained of her courage and stepped down from the platform. Her legs trembled, threatening to give way beneath her, but she willed them to hold steady. She would not appear weak. Whatever this mountain man wanted from her, she would not give him the satisfaction of seeing her fear. Stone led her through the town without speaking, his long strides forcing her to nearly jog to keep up. People stopped to stare as they passed, their expressions ranging from curiosity to pity to something that looked disturbingly like horror. What had this man done to inspire such reactions? They stopped in front of a massive black horse that was tied to a post outside the general store. Beside it stood a mule loaded with supplies. Stone untied both animals and turned to face Clara for the first time since leaving the square. Up close he was even more imposing. She barely came up to his shoulder, and she had to crane her neck to meet his eyes, those gray eyes that revealed nothing of what he was thinking. "Can you ride? I learned as a child, but it has been years. You will ride with me then. The trail is rough." Before Clara could respond, his hands were on her waist, lifting her as if she weighed nothing at all. She found herself seated behind the saddle of the black horse, her heart pounding from the unexpected contact. Stone mounted in front of her with the ease of someone who had spent most of his life on horseback. "Hold on," he said. "It is a long journey." Clara hesitated, then wrapped her arms around his waist. Through his coat she could feel the solid muscle of his torso, the warmth of his body. He smelled of leather and pine and wood smoke, natural scents that were not unpleasant. "Where are we going?" she asked. "Home." That was all he said. Home. As if that single word explained everything she needed to know. They rode out of Denver City as the sun began its descent toward the western horizon. Clara watched the buildings grow smaller behind them, the last remnants of civilization fading into the landscape. Ahead lay nothing but grassland stretching toward the mountains that rose in the distance, their peaks white with early snow. The silence between them stretched on for hours. Stone did not speak, and Clara did not know what to say. She was riding into the wilderness with a stranger, a man who had paid $150 for reasons she did not understand, toward a destination she could not imagine. When the sun had nearly disappeared and the stars were beginning to emerge, Stone finally broke the silence. "We will stop here for the night." He guided the horse toward a small clearing near a stream where a ring of stones indicated that travelers had camped before. Clara slid down from the horse, her legs stiff and aching from hours of riding. Stone moved with practiced efficiency, unsaddling the horse, tying both animals where they could graze, starting a small fire. He produced dried meat and hard biscuits from his supplies and offered her a portion. Clara accepted and ate mechanically, too tired and too overwhelmed to taste the food. The fire crackled between them, casting dancing shadows across Stone's bearded face. "Why did you buy me?" The question emerged before she could stop it. Stone paused, his eyes meeting hers across the flames. "I need someone." "For what?" His jaw tightened slightly, the only sign of emotion she had seen from him. "I have a niece, 6 years old. She needs care that I cannot provide, someone to teach her, to look after her." Clara processed this information. A niece, a child. That was why he had bought her, not for himself but for a child. Where is her mother? Silence. Stone stared into the fire, and for a moment Clara thought he would not answer. "Dead," he said finally. "Her mother and her father both. 6 months ago. An accident. I am sorry." He nodded a single sharp movement. "She came to live with me, but I am not fit to raise a little girl. I do not know how. So you bought me to be her governess." Something like that. Clara felt some of the tension leave her shoulders. This was not what she had expected, not what she had feared. He had not bought her for his bed or his entertainment. He had bought her to care for a child. It was still a transaction, still an arrangement that stripped her of agency. But it was not the worst outcome she had imagined during those long hours on the platform. "What is her name, Lily? That is a beautiful name. She is a good child." Stone's voice softened slightly, the rough edges smoothing away. "Quiet. Too quiet for a girl her age. She does not speak much since her parents died." Clara nodded, understanding. She had seen grief in children before. The silence that came not from peace but from pain, too deep for words. "I will do my best for her." Stone looked at her across the fire, really looked at her for the first time since they had left Denver City. She saw surprise in those gray eyes. Surprise and something that might have been gratitude. Most women would be angry, being bought and taken into the wilderness. Clara met his gaze steadily. "I have been angry. I have been afraid. I have been hungry and cold and desperate. But none of those emotions changed my circumstances. I have learned to accept what I cannot change and focus on what I can. And what can you change here? Perhaps nothing, or perhaps everything." She gestured to the darkness around them. "You brought me here for a purpose. That purpose is Lily. If I can help her, if I can make her life better, then my being here has meaning. That is more than I could say for my life before." Stone was silent for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was quieter. "You are not what I expected." "What did you expect? Tears? Protests? Demands to be returned? Would you have returned me if I demanded it?" "No." "Then what would have been the point?" Another silence. Then, incredibly, the corner of Stone's mouth twitched. It was not quite a smile, but it was close. "Get some sleep. We have far to ride tomorrow." Clara wrapped herself in the blanket he provided and lay down near the fire. Above her the stars spread across the sky in numbers she had never imagined. In Boston, the city lights had obscured all but the brightest. Here there was nothing to dim their glory. She was lying in the wilderness with a stranger riding toward a future she could not predict. By all rights, she should be terrified. Instead, she felt something unexpected, something almost like hope. Tomorrow she would meet Lily. Tomorrow she would see her new home. Tomorrow her new life would truly begin. Whatever came next, she would face it with her eyes open and her spine straight. That was all she could do. That was all anyone could do. They rode on. The landscape changed as they climbed higher into the mountains. The grasslands gave way to forests of pine and spruce, the air growing colder and thinner with each passing hour. Streams cut through the rocky terrain, their water clear and cold as ice. It was beautiful. Harsh and unforgiving, but beautiful in a way that Boston had never been. Clara found herself staring at the peaks ahead of them, white with snow that never melted, and feeling something stir in her chest. This was a place where a person could disappear, a place where the world outside ceased to exist. She understood suddenly why a man might choose to live here rather than among other people. Stone still did not speak much, but she had grown accustomed to his silence. It was not awkward or hostile. It was simply the way he was. Late in the afternoon he finally broke the quiet. "We are close." They crested a ridge, and Clara gasped. Below them lay a valley green and sheltered with a stream running through its center. A log cabin stood near the water, solid and well built. Smoke rose from its chimney. Behind the cabin, a small barn and a chicken coop completed the picture of a self-sufficient mountain homestead. "Welcome to my home," Stone said. His voice held a quiet pride that she had not heard before. "It is beautiful. It is isolated. We are 3 hours' ride from the nearest town. In winter, the snow makes travel nearly impossible for months at a time. That does not frighten me." Stone glanced back at her. "Perhaps not. We will see." They descended into the valley as the sun began its final slide toward the horizon. As they approached the cabin, Clara saw movement in the doorway. A child emerged, small and slight with dark hair that tumbled past her shoulders and pale skin that spoke of too many hours spent indoors. She stood clutching a ragged doll, watching them approach with eyes that were far too solemn for a 6-year-old. "That is," Lily Stone said. Though his voice remained flat, Clara heard something shift beneath the surface. Tenderness, worry, the love of a man who did not know how to express it. They dismounted, and Stone knelt to embrace his niece. The little girl allowed herself to be hugged, but did not return the embrace. Her eyes remained fixed on Clara, studying the stranger with the intense focus of a child who has learned to be wary. Lily Stone said gently, "This is Clara. She is going to stay with us for a while." The child said nothing. Clara approached slowly, careful not to overwhelm the girl. She crouched down to Lily's level, making herself smaller, less threatening. "Hello, Lily. That is a lovely doll you have. Does she have a name?" For a moment she thought Lily would not answer. Then in a voice barely above a whisper the girl said, "Rosie, my mama made her for me. She is beautiful. I can see that your mama loved you very much." Something flickered in Lily's eyes. Pain, grief, the weight of loss that no child should have to carry. "My mama is dead." The bluntness of the statement made Clara's heart ache. "I know. I am very sorry. My parents are dead too." Lily's eyes widened slightly. She looked at Clara with new interest, as if recognizing something familiar. "Does it hurt?" "Yes, it hurts very much. But the hurting gets smaller over time. It never goes away completely, but it gets easier to carry." The child considered this. Then slowly she reached out and took Clara's hand. "Come inside," Lily said. "I will show you the house." Clara looked back at Stone, who was watching them with an expression she could not quite read. Surprise, perhaps, and something that might have been relief. "Go ahead," he said. "I will see to the animals." Clara let herself be led by the small hand clasped in hers, and as she stepped through the door of the cabin she felt the beginning of something she had not expected. Connection. Purpose. The first fragile threads of belonging. The cabin was not what she had anticipated. She had expected rough bachelor quarters, the bare minimum required for survival. Instead, she found a space that spoke of care and attention. The main room was large and open, with a stone fireplace dominating one wall. The furniture was simple but well crafted, made from wood that glowed warmly in the firelight. Shelves lined another wall, and Clara was surprised to see them filled with books. "That is Uncle Eli's reading place," Lily said, following her gaze. "He reads at night when he cannot sleep." "Your uncle likes to read." Lily nodded solemnly. "He has lots of books. Some of them are in languages I do not understand." Clara approached the shelves, her curiosity piqued. Shakespeare, Milton, Plato, Aristotle, a French translation of Les Miserables, Latin texts on philosophy and law. These were not the books of an uneducated mountain hermit. These were the books of a scholar. Who was Elijah Stone? The door opened behind her, and she turned to see him entering with an armload of firewood. He stopped when he saw her standing by the bookshelf. "You can read any of them," he said after a moment. "Books are meant to be read. You have quite a collection. I had a lot of time." Clara noticed he used the past tense. Had, as if that time was now over. She wanted to ask more, but something in his expression warned her against it. There would be time for questions later. For now, she needed to focus on what mattered most. "Lily," she said, turning back to the child, "will you show me where I will be sleeping?" The cabin had 3 rooms, the main living area, a small kitchen attached to it, and 2 bedrooms at the back. Lily led Clara to the smaller of the 2, a narrow space with a single bed, a dresser, and a window that looked out at the mountains. "This used to be for storing things," Lily explained. "But Uncle Eli cleaned it out for you. It is perfect." Clara looked around at the simple room and felt something unexpected. Gratitude. For the first time in months, she had a space that was hers, a bed that was hers, a door she could close against the world. That night, Clara cooked dinner for the three of them. The kitchen was well stocked with basics, and she managed to produce a simple but hearty meal of stew and biscuits. Stone and Lily ate in near silence, but Clara noticed that Lily kept glancing at her with what might have been curiosity. After the meal, while Clara was cleaning up, she heard an unexpected sound. Stone was reading to Lily. She paused at the doorway, watching as the huge, rough man sat in a chair by the fire with the tiny girl curled in his lap. His voice, usually so harsh and clipped, had softened into something almost musical as he read from a book of fairy tales. Lily's eyes were drooping, her small body relaxing against her uncle's chest. For the first time, she looked like what she was. A child. Not a grieving orphan carrying impossible weight, but a little girl safe in the arms of someone who loved her. Something tightened in Clara's chest. This man. This strange, silent, isolated man. He loved his niece more than he knew how to express. He had bought a stranger and brought her into his home because he wanted to give Lily something he could not provide himself. When Lily was asleep, Stone carried her to her room and tucked her into bed. Clara watched from a distance, touched by the gentleness of his movements. "She is lucky to have you," Clara said when he returned to the main room. Stone shook his head. "I am all she has left. That is not luck. That is desperation. It is more than some children have. Believe me." He looked at her with those gray eyes that seemed to see everything. "You speak from experience. My father died when I was 15. My mother followed 2 years later when I was 17. I know what it is like to be young and alone." Stone was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "I am sorry. It was a long time ago. But I remember. I remember feeling like the world had ended and everyone expected me to just carry on as if nothing had changed." "And did you? Carry on?" Clara smiled, though there was no humor in it. "I am still here." "So I suppose I did." Another silence. Then Stone cleared his throat. "You should rest. Tomorrow I will show you the routines, the work that needs doing, and then I will leave you and Lily here while I tend to other matters. You will leave us for a few hours at a time. I hunt, I check my traps, I maintain the property. That work does not stop. Of course." Stone started for the door, then paused. "Clara." "Yes." He stood with his back to her, his shoulders tense. "I need you to understand something. I bought you because I was desperate, because Lily needs someone, and I do not know how to be that person. But I am not. I am not buying you for—" He trailed off, struggling with words that clearly did not come easily. "You are not buying me as a wife," Clara finished for him. "I understand." He turned to look at her relief, visible even through his beard. "Good. You will be cared for, fed, housed, treated with respect. But I expect nothing. Nothing personal in return. You are here for Lily. That is all. That is all I expected." Something passed between them in that moment, an understanding, a mutual acknowledgement that whatever their arrangement might be called, it would be conducted with dignity and respect. "Good night, Clara. Good night, Elijah." It was the first time she had used his first name. She saw him register the familiarity, saw something flicker in his eyes. Then he was gone, and she was alone with the crackling fire and the knowledge that tomorrow her new life would truly begin. She slept better that night than she had in months. The days that followed settled into a rhythm. Clara woke before dawn to prepare breakfast. Stone ate quickly and headed out to check his traps or hunt, or do whatever mysterious work occupied his time. Clara stayed with Lily, cleaning the cabin, teaching the child to read and write, telling her stories, slowly drawing her out of her shell. It was not easy. Lily's grief was deep, and there were days when she would not speak at all. Days when she sat clutching Rosie and staring out the window as if waiting for her parents to appear on the horizon. But there were also good days. Days when Lily laughed at a silly song Clara made up. Days when she asked questions about Boston, about the ocean, about the world beyond the mountains she had always known. "You have seen the ocean?" Lily asked one afternoon, her eyes wide with wonder. "I have. It is bigger than anything you can imagine, bigger even than these mountains. Bigger than Uncle Eli's mountains? Clara smiled. Maybe not quite that big. Your uncle's mountains are special. He says they keep him safe. Safe from what Lily shrugged with the unconcern of childhood. From people. Clara filed that information away, adding it to the puzzle she was slowly assembling. Elijah Stone had lived alone in these mountains for 8 years, according to the whispers she had heard in Denver City. He had cut himself off from the world, from civilization, from human connection. Why? What had driven him to such extreme isolation? The answer came 3 weeks later on a cold October evening. Stone had been gone longer than usual, checking trap lines that extended far into the wilderness. Clara had fed Lily dinner and put her to bed before settling by the fire with one of Stone's books. She was deep in a French novel when the door opened, and he entered, bringing with him the cold night air and the scent of snow. "Storm coming," he said, hanging his coat by the door. "Tomorrow, probably. We should prepare." Clara set aside her book. "I will gather extra firewood in the morning." Stone nodded, then paused. His eyes had fallen on the book in her lap. "You read French, my father taught me, and Latin, and Greek." He believed in education for everyone, regardless of sex. Harvard Stone said quietly, "I beg your pardon." "Your father. He was a professor at Harvard." Clara stared at him. "How did you know that?" Stone moved to the fire, warming his hands over the flames. His back was to her when he spoke again. "Because I was a student there, 10 years ago." The revelation hit Clara like a physical blow. This rough, wild man in his animal skins, living alone in the wilderness, had been a student at the most prestigious university in the country. "You went to Harvard. I was studying law. Was supposed to graduate, take over my father's business interests." "What happened?" Silence, long and heavy and full of things unsaid. "I killed a man," Stone said finally. Or so they said. Clara felt the blood drain from her face. What he turned to face her, and in the firelight she saw something she had not seen before. Pain. Deep, old, scarred over pain. 8 years ago, a man was found dead on my family's property, Jonathan Caldwell, son of the local banker. He had been stabbed, and I was found standing over the body with the knife in my hand. Clara's heart was pounding. "Did you do it?" "No. I heard a noise in the stable, went to investigate, found him dying on the ground. I pulled the knife out, tried to help him. That was when the others arrived, and they thought I had killed him. Victoria, his sister, was the first to arrive. She saw me with the knife. She screamed, called me a murderer." Victoria. The name triggered a memory. The woman at the auction. The whispers Clara had overheard. What happened? Stone turned back to the fire. His voice was flat now, drained of emotion. "My father saved me. He sold off land, borrowed money, bribed officials. He kept me from hanging. But the condition was that I leave Montana Territory and never return. So you came here. I was supposed to leave entirely, go east, disappear into some city. Instead, I went up into the mountains, built this cabin, stayed where no one would find me." "For 8 years," Clara said softly. "You have been alone for 8 years. I had no choice. If I went back, they would have killed me. And I could not prove my innocence. Could not. Or cannot." Stone's hands clenched at his sides. "My mother knew the truth. She saw something that night, something that would have cleared my name. She wrote it in a letter to my sister Sarah. But my mother died before she could come forward, and Sarah died before she could tell anyone what she knew." "Your sister? Lily's mother?" "Yes." Clara rose from her chair and moved closer to the fire. Closer to him. "You think she was killed?" Stone's jaw tightened. "The official story is that her wagon went off the road on a mountain pass. An accident. But Sarah knew those roads. She would never have traveled that pass at night. Someone made that wagon crash. Someone wanted to silence her before she could reveal what our mother had discovered, who I do not know." He turned to face her, and she saw the torment in his eyes. "That is why I have stayed hidden, because whoever killed Jonathan Caldwell, whoever killed my sister, they are still out there. And if they know I am asking questions, they might come for you, or for anyone close to me." He paused, and Clara saw understanding dawn in his expression. "That is why I did not tell you before, because knowing the truth puts you in danger." Clara absorbed this information, feeling the weight of it settle over her. Does Lily know? She knows her parents died. She does not know the rest. She is too young. And what happens now? Stone shook his head slowly. I do not know. For 8 years I have been waiting, watching, trying to find evidence that would clear my name, but the truth remains buried. Then perhaps Clara said quietly, "It is time to dig it up." Stone stared at her. "What you have been hiding, waiting for someone else to uncover the truth. But no one else is looking. If you want answers, you will have to find them yourself. I cannot leave. If I go back to town to the ranch, they will recognize me. Then do not go yourself." Clara met his gaze steadily. Send someone they do not know, someone they would not suspect. The realization hit them both at the same moment. "You," Stone said, "you are suggesting that I send you. Why not? I am educated. I can read and investigate. No one in town knows me. I am just the woman you bought at auction. No one would suspect me of anything. It is too dangerous. It is already dangerous." Clara stepped closer to him. "Elijah, you have been living in shadow for 8 years. Lily has lost her parents. Somewhere out there, a murderer walks free. How long are you going to let fear rule your life?" Stone's expression flickered. No one had challenged him like this in years, perhaps ever. "Why do you care?" he asked. "This is not your fight." Clara considered the question. Why did she care? She had known this man for barely a month. Her contract bound her to care for his niece, nothing more. But something had changed in these weeks of living in his cabin, eating at his table, reading his books. Something had grown between them, fragile and unnamed, but real. "Because Lily deserves to know what happened to her parents," Clara said. "Because you deserve to have your name cleared, and because in the past month you have shown me more respect and kindness than anyone has in years. That matters. You matter." Stone was silent for a long time. The fire crackled between them, casting dancing shadows on the walls. "In the morning," he said finally. "We will talk more in the morning. The storm is coming, and there is work to do." He turned away, but not before Clara saw something shift in his expression, something that might have been hope or gratitude or the first crack in the walls he had built around himself. She returned to her chair and her book, but she could not concentrate on the words. Her mind was racing with possibilities, with plans, with the terrifying and exhilarating prospect of what she had just proposed. She was going to help him. She was going to find the truth. And somewhere in the back of her mind a voice whispered something she was not yet ready to acknowledge. She was going to do it because she was beginning to care for him, more than she should, more than was wise. But that was a problem for another day. Tonight she would rest. Tomorrow the real work would begin. The storm came the next morning just as Stone had predicted. Snow fell thick and fast, blanketing the valley in white, making the cabin feel like an island in an endless sea of winter. They were trapped together for 3 days. Clara and Stone and little Lily huddled around the fire while the wind howled outside. It should have been uncomfortable, awkward, tense. Instead, it was peaceful. They talked, really talked for the first time since Clara had arrived. Stone told her about his childhood on Stone Creek Ranch, about his parents and his sister, about the life he had lost. Clara told him about Boston, about her father's lectures on philosophy, about the years of loneliness that had followed his death. Lily listened to their stories with wide eyes, asking questions, sometimes even laughing at the funny parts. The child was coming alive again, slowly but surely, warmed by the presence of 2 adults who cared about her. On the 3rd night, when Lily had fallen asleep in Stone's lap, Clara found herself studying his face in the firelight. He was handsome, she realized with a start. Beneath the beard, beneath the roughness, there was a strong jaw and a well-shaped mouth. There were lines around his eyes from years of squinting into the sun and snow, and his hands were calloused from hard work. But when he looked at his sleeping niece, his expression softened into something almost beautiful. "You would make a good father?" Clara said quietly. Stone glanced up at her. I am only her uncle. That is not what I meant." He understood. She saw it in his eyes, the acknowledgment of what was growing between them, unspoken and unnamed. "I am a wanted man, Clara. Even if I clear my name, my reputation is destroyed. I have nothing to offer anyone. You have this." Clara gestured to the cabin around them. A home, a family, a life in hiding, a life nonetheless. Her voice was gentle but firm. "There are worse things than isolation, Elijah. There is loneliness in a crowded room. There is emptiness in a life full of people who do not see you. At least here you are known. At least here you are real." Stone said nothing for a long moment. Then carefully he shifted Lily in his arms and rose to carry her to bed. When he returned, he stopped in front of Clara's chair. She looked up at him, heart suddenly pounding. "When the storm passes," he said quietly, "we will start. We will find the truth. Together." "Together," Clara agreed. He reached down and touched her face just briefly, a brush of calloused fingers against her cheek. Then he was gone, settling into his usual spot by the fire, and Clara was left with the lingering warmth of his touch and the certainty that everything was about to change. The storm broke the following morning. The sun emerged brilliant against the white snow, and the world seemed to breathe again. Clara stood on the cabin porch, watching Lily build a lopsided snowman while Stone chopped firewood nearby. The scene was so domestic, so normal, that it made her chest ache. This could be her life. This cabin, this man, this child. A family, however unconventional. But first, there was work to do, ghosts to lay to rest, a truth to uncover. Clara wrapped her shawl tighter around her shoulders and went inside to plan. The hunt for the truth was about to begin. The letter changed everything. Clara found it by accident 3 days after the storm broke. She was cleaning behind the bookshelf, dusting away months of accumulated grime, when a folded piece of paper slipped from between 2 volumes and fluttered to the floor. The handwriting was feminine, elegant loops and careful curves that spoke of education and refinement. The paper was creased from being folded and unfolded, many times worn at the edges from handling. Clara knew she should not read it. It was not addressed to her. It was clearly something private, something treasured hidden away in this cabin full of secrets. But the date caught her eye. 3 days before Sarah Stone had died. She read it. "Dear Eli, I need you to come home immediately. I have discovered something about the night Jonathan Caldwell died. Something that proves your innocence beyond any doubt. You did not kill him, Eli. I have evidence now, real evidence. But I also know who truly committed the murder, and they are watching me. I can feel their eyes everywhere I go. I think they know that I know. If something happens to me, look in Mother's box, the one Father gave her on their wedding day. You will find everything you need inside. I love you, brother. Please come home." Sarah Clara's hands trembled as she finished reading. Sarah had known the truth. She had found evidence that would have cleared Elijah's name. And 3 days later, she was dead. This was not an accident. This was murder. The cabin door opened and Clara spun around to find Elijah standing in the doorway, snow melting on his shoulders, his expression shifting from curiosity to shock as he saw what she held. "Where did you find that?" "It fell from behind the bookshelf. I was cleaning and it just appeared." "Elijah, this letter?" "I know what it says." His voice was rough, strained. "I have read it 1,000 times. She found proof. Your sister found proof that you are innocent." Elijah crossed the room in 3 long strides and took the letter from her hands. He stared at it as though seeing it for the first time, though Clara knew he must have memorized every word. "This letter arrived 2 days after Sarah died." His voice cracked slightly. "I was too late. I have always been too late. The box she mentions. Your mother's box. Do you know where it is? It should be at Stone Creek Ranch, in my parents' bedroom, but the ranch is controlled by Thomas Webb now, my father's former manager. He was the one who threw me out when I tried to investigate Sarah's death. Then we need to get into that ranch without Webb knowing." Elijah looked up at her, and Clara saw something new in his gray eyes. Not defeat, Not resignation, but the first flicker of determination she had witnessed since learning his story. It is too dangerous. If Webb is involved, if he is protecting whoever killed Jonathan and Sarah, then he is already our enemy. Clara stepped closer to him. Elijah, your sister died trying to save you. Are you going to let her sacrifice mean nothing? The words hit him like a physical blow. She saw him flinch, saw the pain ripple across his features. What do you suggest? The Harvest Festival, Clara said. You told me about it. The entire town celebrates. Everyone attends, including ranch workers. If we time it right, the ranch will be nearly empty. We? Elijah's voice was flat. You keep saying we. I am coming with you. No. Yes. Clara's chin lifted. You cannot do this alone. You need someone to watch your back, to help search, to be a second pair of eyes. I am that person. You are supposed to care for Lily. Lily can stay with Martha Chen. You said she was the one person in town you still trusted. Elijah stared at her for a long moment. She could see the war playing out behind his eyes, the desire to protect her battling against the knowledge that she was right. If something happens to you, then it will be my choice, my risk. Clara reached out and touched his arm. Elijah, I have spent my entire life being protected, being told what I could and could not do, being treated like something fragile that might break. Let me be strong for once. Let me help. The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken things. Then Elijah nodded once, a sharp movement. The festival is in 2 weeks. We will prepare. 2 weeks. Clara felt her heart accelerate. 2 weeks to plan. 2 weeks to prepare. 2 weeks until everything changed. I will be ready, she said. Elijah looked at her with those gray storm cloud eyes, and something passed between them that neither was willing to name. I believe you will, he said quietly. The days that followed were filled with preparation. Elijah taught Clara to ride properly, not the gentle ambling she had done on the journey from Denver City, but real riding. How to control a horse at speed, how to dismount quickly, how to stay in the saddle on rough terrain. He taught her to shoot. The rifle was heavy in her hands, the kick against her shoulder bruising. But Clara was determined. She fired round after round until her arms ached and her ears rang until she could hit the target with reasonable accuracy. You are a quick learner, Elijah said one afternoon, watching her reload with practiced movements. I had a good teacher. Their eyes met over the rifle barrel, and Clara felt the heat rise in her cheeks. There was something happening between them, something that grew stronger with each passing day. Every accidental touch sent electricity through her veins. Every shared glance lingered a moment too long. She was falling for him. She knew it with absolute certainty. This rough, wounded, beautiful man had crept into her heart without her permission, and she suspected from the way he looked at her that he was falling too. But neither of them spoke of it. Not yet. There was too much at stake, too many dangers ahead. The feelings between them would have to wait until they had survived what was coming. The night before they left for Pine Ridge, Clara sat by the fire with Lily reading stories and braiding the little girl's dark hair. Elijah watched from his usual chair, his expression unreadable. You will be good for Mrs. Chen, Clara said gently. We will only be gone for a day or two. Lily nodded solemnly. You will come back, I promise. Uncle Eli too. Clara glanced at Elijah. He will come back too. Lily seemed satisfied. She curled up against Clara's side, her small body warm and trusting. I do not want you to go away like Mama and Papa went away. The words struck Clara like a knife. She pulled Lily closer, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. I will always come back to you, Lily. Always. She meant it. Whatever happened at Stone Creek Ranch, she would find a way back to this child who had come to mean so much to her. Later, after Lily was asleep, Clara and Elijah sat together in the quiet cabin. The fire crackled softly. Outside, an owl called into the darkness. Thank you, Elijah said suddenly. For what? For everything. For caring for Lily. For believing me when no one else would. For being here. Clara smiled. You bought me. Remember, I did not have much choice. We both know that is not true. You could have run. You could have made my life difficult. Instead, you have made it bearable. More than bearable." He reached across the space between them and took her hand. His palm was warm and rough, calloused from years of hard work. "Clara, I need to tell you something before tomorrow, in case something happens, in case I do not get another chance." Her heart was pounding so hard she was certain he could hear it. "Tell me." He lifted her hand to his lips and pressed a kiss to her knuckles. Such a gentle gesture from such a rough man. "I have feelings for you, deep feelings. I know I have no right to them. I know I am a wanted man with nothing to offer. But I cannot go into tomorrow without you knowing that when I look at you I see a future I thought I would never have." Clara's breath caught in her throat. She had known, of course, had sensed it in every lingering glance, every careful touch. But hearing the words spoken aloud made them real in a way that nothing else could. "Elijah," she whispered, "you do not have to say anything. I know this is not the time or the place. I just needed you to know." She stood from her chair and crossed to where he sat. She sank down beside him, taking his face between her hands, forcing him to meet her eyes. "I have feelings for you, too. I have had them for weeks. Since the night of the storm when you told me your story. Maybe even before that. From the moment you looked at me on that auction platform and saw something more than merchandise. Clara, I do not care that you are a wanted man. I do not care that you have nothing." She smiled through the tears that were threatening to fall. "You have given me a home, a family, a purpose. You have treated me with more respect and kindness than anyone in my life. That is worth more than money or status or anything else." Elijah pulled her close, and when his lips met hers, Clara felt the world fall away. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, as though he was afraid she might break. But when she responded, pressing closer, tangling her fingers in his hair, it deepened into something fierce and hungry. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Elijah rested his forehead against hers. "If we survive tomorrow," he said roughly, "I am going to ask you to marry me properly." Clara laughed a sound of pure joy. "And I am going to say yes." "Good." He kissed her again, softer this time. "Now get some sleep. Tomorrow will be a long day." She went to her room reluctantly, her lips still tingling from his kisses. As she lay in the darkness listening to the wind whisper through the pines, Clara realized that she was no longer afraid. Whatever tomorrow brought, she would face it with Elijah at her side. And that was enough. That was everything. They reached Pine Ridge as the Harvest Festival was reaching its peak. The main street was crowded with people, farmers and ranchers and townspeople, all gathered to celebrate the end of the growing season. Music drifted from the saloon. Children ran through the streets laughing and playing. Clara marveled at the contrast between this bustling celebration and the quiet isolation of the cabin she had come to call home. It had only been 2 months since she had stood on an auction platform in Denver City, but it felt like a lifetime. They left Lily with Martha Chen, the sharp-eyed Chinese woman who ran the general store. She asked no questions, simply nodded and took the child by the hand. "Be careful," she said to Elijah. "Both of you. We will try." As they moved through the crowd, Clara noticed the stares. People recognized Elijah despite his 8-year absence. They whispered behind their hands, pointing some with curiosity and others with something darker. Then she saw her, Victoria Caldwell. The woman was beautiful in a cold, perfect way. Dark hair, elaborately styled, expensive dress that spoke of wealth and privilege. Dark eyes that swept the crowd with barely concealed boredom. A man walked beside her, older and heavy-set, with the sleek look of someone accustomed to power. "That is her father," Elijah murmured. "Horace Caldwell. He owns the bank, and half the town." Before Clara could respond, Victoria's gaze found them. Her expression shifted from boredom to shock, to something that looked almost like fear. She crossed the square quickly, her father trailing behind. "Elijah Stone." Victoria's voice dripped with false sweetness. "After 8 years you finally come down from your mountain. I had business in town." Victoria's eyes slid to Clara, assessing dismissive. "And who is this?" "Your new servant." Clara felt her spine stiffen. Elijah's hand tightened on her arm, but she spoke before he could. "I am Clara Bennett, and I am no one's servant." Something flickered in Victoria's expression. Surprise, perhaps, at being challenged. The woman from the auction. Victoria's lip curled. "I heard about that. How desperate you must have been, Elijah, to buy yourself a bride when no decent woman would have you. That is enough, Victoria." "No, I do not think it is." Victoria stepped closer, her voice dropping to a hiss. "You should not have come back. You were supposed to disappear. That was the agreement. I never agreed to anything. I was forced out by lies and false accusations." Victoria laughed a cold sound without humor. "Still clinging to your innocence. Everyone knows what you did, Elijah. Everyone knows you killed my brother." Clara had heard enough. "That is interesting," she said, her voice calm and clear, "because I have heard a different story, one that involves evidence of Elijah's innocence, evidence that your brother was killed by someone else entirely." Victoria went pale. The transformation was instantaneous and complete, her carefully maintained composure cracking. "I do not know what you are talking about." "I think you do." Clara held her gaze steadily. "I think you know exactly what I'm talking about, and I think you know who really killed Jonathan." Silence fell over the small group. Horace Caldwell was looking between his daughter and Clara with growing concern. "Victoria, what is she talking about?" "Nothing, Father, nothing at all. This woman is clearly deranged." Victoria gathered herself, but Clara could see her hands trembling. "Elijah, control your property before she causes trouble for herself." She spun and walked away, her father following with confused protests. Clara watched her go, noting the stiffness in her shoulders, the barely controlled panic in her movements. "She knows something," Clara said quietly. "She knows more than she is admitting." "I saw it too." Elijah's voice was grim. "We need to move, if she alerts Webb or anyone else." They slipped away from the festival, moving through back streets and alleys until they reached the edge of town. Stone Creek Ranch lay 3 miles to the east, its borders marked by wooden fencing that stretched toward the mountains. They tied their horses in a copse of trees 1/2 mile from the main house and continued on foot. The ranch was larger than Clara had imagined, with a massive barn, several outbuildings, and a house that would not have been out of place in any eastern city. "This was your home," she whispered. "This was everything." Elijah's voice was tight with emotion. "My father built it from nothing. 3 generations of Stones have lived and died here, and now Thomas Webb controls it. For now." They approached the house from the rear, using the barn as cover. As Clara had predicted, most of the workers were in town for the festival. The ranch was eerily quiet, only a handful of figures visible in the distance. The kitchen door was unlocked. They slipped inside, moving through rooms that had been preserved like a museum. Furniture covered in dust cloths. Portraits on the walls, stern-faced ancestors staring down at them. "This way." Elijah led her up a staircase, his footsteps careful and light despite his size. At the end of the hall, he pushed open a door. "My mother's room." The space had clearly not been touched in years. Dust lay thick on every surface. The bed was still made, waiting for an occupant who would never return. A woman's brush sat on the vanity strands of gray hair still caught in its bristles. The box, Clara reminded him gently. "We need to find the box." They searched quietly, methodically. Under the bed, in the wardrobe, behind the heavy curtains. Clara was beginning to lose hope when she noticed something odd about a painting on the wall. Elijah. He came to her side, and together they examined the painting. A landscape scene, unremarkable but mounted strangely close to the wall. Clara reached behind it and felt her fingers brush against something solid. A wooden box inlaid with mother of pearl hidden in a hollow carved into the wall itself. "This is it," Elijah breathed. "My mother's wedding box." They set it on the bed and opened it carefully. Inside were letters, a diary, and a single page written in a hand Clara now recognized as Sarah's. Elijah read his sister's final message aloud, his voice barely above a whisper. "I have discovered the truth about the night Jonathan Caldwell died. Mother saw what happened. She wrote it in her diary and told me before she died, but she was too afraid to come forward. She feared for her own life and for mine. Thomas Webb killed Jonathan Caldwell. Jonathan had discovered that Webb was embezzling money from Stone Creek Ranch, selling cattle secretly and pocketing the profits. He threatened to expose Webb. That night, they argued in the barn. Webb stabbed him. Victoria Caldwell knows the truth. She arrived at the barn before anyone else and saw Webb fleeing with the bloody knife. But she chose to blame Elijah instead because Father had promised her to Elijah in marriage and she wanted to be free of the engagement. Horace Caldwell also knows. He helped cover up the truth to protect his daughter and to use the scandal to acquire Stone family assets. Mother wrote everything in her diary, dates, times, what she witnessed from her window. The evidence is here. If anything happens to me, Eli, take this to the sheriff. Take it to the territorial judge if you must. Clear your name. I love you, brother. I am sorry I could not tell you sooner. Elijah's hands were shaking when he finished reading. 8 years. 8 years of exile, of isolation, of believing he might never prove his innocence. And here was the proof. Right here in his hands. We need to leave, Clara said urgently. We need to get this to the sheriff before anyone realizes we were here. Too late. The voice came from the doorway. They spun to find Thomas Webb standing there, a pistol in his hand, his face twisted with cold fury. I knew you would come back eventually, Elijah Stone. Webb stepped into the room, keeping the gun trained on them. I just did not expect you to bring a woman to do your dirty work. Webb. Elijah moved subtly, positioning himself between the gun and Clara. It was you all along. Of course it was me. Webb laughed a harsh sound. Jonathan was going to ruin everything. Decades I spent building my position here, and that gambling fool was going to destroy it over a few $1,000s. So you killed him. He gave me no choice. Webb's expression darkened. And then you had to show up at exactly the wrong moment. I thought pinning it on you would solve all my problems. The Stone family disgraced their assets, vulnerable, and me perfectly positioned to take control. And Sarah Elijah's voice was deadly quiet. You killed her too. Your sister was as foolish as your mother. Webb shook his head. They both saw things they should not have seen. Your mother was smart enough to keep quiet. But Sarah started asking questions, digging through old records. I could not let her expose the truth. Clara felt rage building in her chest. This man had destroyed an entire family, had stolen 8 years of Elijah's life, had murdered his sister and left a little girl orphaned. You will not get away with this, she said. Webb turned the gun toward her. And who is going to stop me? You. A woman bought at auction. He laughed. When they find your bodies, everyone will assume Elijah finally went completely mad. Killed his little mail-order bride and then himself. Tragic, but not surprising. He cocked the pistol. I have been waiting 8 years for this, he said. Say goodbye, Stone. What happened next occurred in a single heartbeat. Elijah lunged forward, shoving Clara to one side as the gun fired. She felt the bullet tear through the air where she had been standing, heard it slam into the wall behind her. They crashed to the floor together, Elijah on top of Webb, struggling for control of the weapon. The two men rolled across the room, fists flying, furniture shattering around them. Clara scrambled for the gun that had been knocked away in the struggle. Her hands closed around the grip just as Webb managed to throw Elijah off and pull a knife from his boot. Stop! She held the pistol in both hands, aimed at Webb's chest. Her arms were trembling, but her voice was steady. Drop the knife. Webb stared at her, calculating. Do you even know how to use that thing I learned from the man you framed for murder? Clara's finger tightened on the trigger. Drop it. Now. For a long moment no one moved. Then Webb let the knife clatter to the floor. Kick it away. He did. Elijah rose, pressing a hand to his shoulder where blood was seeping through his shirt. The bullet had grazed him, but he was alive. He was alive. Clara, he said, are you all right? I am fine. She kept her eyes on Webb. Get the evidence. I will watch him. Elijah gathered the diary, the letters, everything from the box. He tucked them safely inside his coat. Now we are going to walk to town, Clara said to Webb, And you are going to confess to the sheriff." Webb laughed. "You think anyone will believe you? The word of a bought woman and a suspected murderer against mine." "We have your confession," Elijah said. "And we have the evidence you have been trying to suppress for 8 years. The truth is coming out, Webb. Today." They marched him out of the house at gunpoint, through the ranch onto the road to town. Clara's arms ached from holding the pistol steady, but she did not waver. When they reached the sheriff's office, the harvest festival was still in full swing. People stopped and stared as they passed, whispers spreading like wildfire. Clara did not care. Let them stare. Let them whisper. The truth was about to be revealed. Sheriff Thomas Morgan looked up in surprise as they entered his office. Elijah Stone. "What in the—" "This man is Thomas Webb," Clara said. "He murdered Jonathan Caldwell 8 years ago. He also murdered Sarah Stone 6 months ago. We have evidence." She placed the diary on the sheriff's desk. "Read it," she said. "Read it and tell me Elijah Stone is guilty." The next hour was chaos. The sheriff read the diary, the letter Sarah's final statement. He questioned Webb, who maintained his innocence until he realized the evidence was overwhelming. Then he started making threats, then excuses, then finally, when all else failed, confessions. Yes, he killed Jonathan. The man was going to destroy him. Yes, he let Elijah take the blame. What else could he do? Yes, he killed Sarah. She was going to expose everything. By the time he finished talking, half the town was crowded outside the sheriff's office, pressing to hear the revelations. Clara stood beside Elijah, her hand in his, watching as the man who had stolen 8 years of his life was led away in chains. The day before the trial, Victoria Caldwell came to the sheriff's office where Clara was reviewing documents. "I need to speak with you," Victoria said. Her voice was different now, smaller, afraid. Clara looked up. "What do you want? I know what I did was unforgivable." Victoria's hands were trembling. "I let an innocent man suffer for 8 years. I watched my father and Webb destroy your family. And I said nothing. Why are you telling me this? Because I cannot live with the guilt anymore." Victoria's eyes filled with tears. "When I saw you in the square when you confronted me about Jonathan, I realized how hollow my life has become, built on lies, sustained by silence." Clara studied the woman before her. The arrogance was gone. In its place was something raw and broken. "What do you want from me, Victoria? I want to know if it is too late. To tell the truth. To try to make amends." Clara was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "It is never too late to do the right thing. The question is whether you have the courage." Victoria nodded slowly. "I will testify tomorrow. I will tell them everything." She left without another word, and Clara watched her go, wondering if people truly could change. "I do not believe it," someone said. "Elijah Stone was innocent all along. Poor man, living in exile while the real killer walked free. And his sister, murdered to keep her quiet. What kind of monster?" Elijah said nothing. His face was pale, his expression stunned. After so many years of fighting, of hoping, of waiting, it was finally over. Clara squeezed his hand. "It is done," she whispered. "You are free." He looked at her, and she saw tears in his gray eyes. Tears he had probably not shed in 8 years. "I do not know how to be free," he said. "I do not know who I am without this weight. Then we will figure it out together." She rose on her toes and kissed him right there in front of the sheriff and the crowd and God and everyone. Let them talk. Let them see. She was not ashamed. When they broke apart, Elijah was smiling, the first real smile she had ever seen on his face. "I love you, Clara Bennett. I love you too, Elijah Stone." And in that moment, surrounded by chaos and revelation, they were exactly where they were meant to be. Victoria Caldwell was arrested the following day. She tried to flee during the night, but the sheriff's deputies caught her at the territorial border. Her father followed soon after, charged as an accessory to the cover-up. The trial was swift and merciless. Webb was sentenced to hang. Victoria received 20 years in prison. Horace Caldwell lost everything. His bank seized his assets, distributed to those he had defrauded. And Elijah Stone, after 8 years of exile, was formally declared innocent of all charges. More than that, he was declared the rightful owner of Stone Creek Ranch. The property that had been stolen from his family was returned along with a formal apology from the territorial government. But before any of that could be sorted out, there was one more surprise. Clara came to stand beside Elijah, taking his hand. "Are you all right?" He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I spent 8 years hating everyone who wronged me, hating Webb, hating Victoria, hating the sheriff and the judge and everyone who did not believe me. And now I just want to let it go." He turned to face her, and she saw peace in his eyes for the first time. "I have you. I have Lily. I have my name and my family's land. That is enough. That is more than enough." Clara smiled up at him. "When are you going to make an honest woman of me, Elijah Stone?" He laughed, a sound she never tired of hearing. Soon, he promised. Very soon. But first, there was the matter of Stone Creek Ranch. They rode out to see it together, Elijah and Clara and Lily, on a crisp autumn afternoon. The house was larger than Clara had remembered, grand in a way that felt foreign after months in the mountain cabin. "This is your home," Lily said in wonder. "It is so big." "This is our home," Elijah corrected. "All of ours." He showed them the rooms where he had grown up, the barn where he had learned to ride the fields that had once been thick with cattle. Everything was dusty and neglected after years of Webb's mismanagement, but the bones were solid. "We have work to do," Clara said, looking around at the chaos. "Years of work," Elijah agreed. "But we have time." They walked through the house making plans. This room would be Lily's bedroom, this one a study. Here they would put a proper schoolroom where Clara could teach not just Lily, but other children from the neighboring ranches. And here Elijah said, leading her to a room at the end of the hall. "This was my parents' room." Clara stepped inside. Even under the dust, she could see that it had once been beautiful. Large windows overlooking the mountains, a fireplace carved with intricate patterns, a bed big enough for a family. "It could be our room," Elijah said quietly, "if you want it." Clara turned to face him. She saw the hope in his eyes, the vulnerability he rarely showed. "I want it," she said. "I want all of it. The house, the ranch, the life. But most of all, I want you." He pulled her into his arms and held her close. Outside they could hear Lily running through the halls, her laughter echoing off the walls. "This is real," Clara whispered. "This is actually happening." "It is real," Elijah confirmed, "and it is only the beginning." That night they stayed at the ranch. Lily fell asleep in what would become her bedroom, exhausted from exploring. Clara and Elijah sat on the porch watching the stars appear one by one. "I never thought I would be here again," Elijah said. "I never thought I would have any of this." "Neither did I." Clara leaned against his shoulder. 3 months ago I was standing on an auction block praying that whoever bought me would not be a monster. And instead you got me. Instead I got you." She smiled in the darkness. "The best thing that ever happened to me." Elijah turned and cupped her face in his hands. "Marry me, Clara. Not because of a contract or an arrangement. Marry me because I love you. Because I cannot imagine my life without you. Because when I look at you, I see everything I ever wanted and never thought I could have." Clara felt tears sliding down her cheeks. Happy tears. Grateful tears. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, Elijah. 1,000 times yes." He kissed her long and deep, and the stars wheeled overhead, and somewhere in the house a little girl slept peacefully, and for the first time in 8 years all was right with the world. The wedding would come later. The rebuilding of the ranch. The challenges of making a life in this harsh and beautiful country. But tonight, there was only this. 2 people who had found each other against impossible odds. 2 hearts that had learned to beat as one. And that was more than enough. That was everything. Spring came to Stone Creek Ranch like a promise kept. The snow melted from the mountain peaks, rushing down in streams that swelled the creek to twice its normal size. Wildflowers erupted across the meadows in waves of purple and yellow and white. The air grew warm and sweet with the scent of new growth. and Clara Stone formerly. Clara Bennett watched it all from the porch of the house that had become her home. 3 months had passed since the trial. 3 months of rebuilding, of healing, of learning what it meant to be part of a family again. The ranch was slowly coming back to life under Elijah's careful management. He had hired back the workers who had been loyal to his father, dismissed those who had served Webb's corruption, and begun the long process of restoring what had been neglected for nearly a decade. Clara had her own work. She had transformed the dusty, neglected house into a true home. She had scrubbed floors and washed windows and aired out rooms that had been closed for years. She had hung new curtains and arranged furniture and filled vases with wildflowers that Lily picked on her daily adventures. The little girl had blossomed in ways that made Clara's heart ache with joy. Lily laughed now. She ran and played and asked endless questions about everything she saw. She called Clara Mama Clara without hesitation, and the first time she had done it, Clara had cried for an hour. This was her life now. This was her family. And in 2 weeks, it would all become official. The wedding. Clara stood at the window of what would soon be their bedroom, watching Elijah work in the corral below. He was breaking a new horse, moving with the easy confidence of a man who had grown up in the saddle. The animal fought him at first, bucking and rearing, but Elijah was patient. He spoke softly, touched gently, and gradually the horse calmed. He was like that with everything Clara had learned. Patient, steady, willing to wait for trust to be earned rather than demanding it be given. She loved him more than she had thought it possible to love anyone. A knock at the door pulled her from her thoughts. She turned to find Martha Chen standing in the hallway, her arms full of fabric. "The dress is ready for final fitting," the older woman announced. "Come, we do not have much time." Clara followed her to the sewing room where a wedding dress hung waiting. It was simple but beautiful white silk with delicate lace at the collar and cuffs, a modest train that would sweep behind her as she walked. Martha had insisted on making it herself, her gift to the woman who had saved Elijah Stone and brought happiness back to this valley. "It is perfect," Clara whispered, running her fingers over the fabric. "Try it on. We need to make sure everything fits." Clara changed carefully, and Martha helped her with the buttons and the lacing. When it was done, they stood together before the mirror. The woman looking back at Clara was almost unrecognizable. She had gained weight in the months since leaving Denver City, her frame filling out with proper meals and regular rest. Her skin had taken on a healthy glow from hours spent outdoors. Her hair, which had been dull and lifeless, now shone with vitality. But it was more than physical changes. There was something in her eyes that had not been there before. Confidence, peace, joy. "You are beautiful," Martha said softly. "Elijah is a lucky man. I am the lucky one." Martha smiled and patted her arm. "You are both lucky. You found each other. In this hard world that is no small thing." The days before the wedding passed in a blur of preparation. Guests would be coming from all over the territory, ranchers and townspeople, and even a few officials from the territorial government. Elijah had resisted at first, wanting a small ceremony, but Clara had convinced him that this was about more than just their marriage. This was about reclaiming his place in the community. This was about showing everyone that the Stone family had survived, had endured, had emerged stronger from the trials that had nearly destroyed them. The night before the ceremony, Clara could not sleep. She wandered through the quiet house, checking on Lily, who slumbered peacefully, touching the furniture and walls as if to confirm they were real. She found herself in the kitchen, heating water for tea, when she heard footsteps behind her. Elijah stood in the doorway, his hair mussed from sleep, wearing only his trousers and an untucked shirt. Could not sleep either. Clara shook her head. Too much to think about. He crossed the room and wrapped his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on top of her head. "Are you having second thoughts?" "Never." She turned in his embrace, looking up at his face. "I was just thinking about how different my life is now. How different I am. Good different. The best different." He kissed her forehead. "Tomorrow you become my wife. I already am your wife, in every way that matters. The ceremony is just making it official." Elijah smiled that rare and precious smile that still made her heart skip. "I love you, Clara. I love you too." They stood together in the dark kitchen holding each other, and Clara felt a peace so profound it was almost painful. This man, this life, this home, everything she had ever wanted, everything she had never dared to hope for. Tomorrow would change nothing and everything at once. The wedding day dawned clear and bright. Clara woke to find Lily jumping on her bed, too excited to contain herself. "Wake up, Mama." "Clara, wake up, today is the wedding." Clara laughed and pulled the little girl into a hug. "I know, sweetheart, I know." The morning was chaos. Martha Chen arrived early to help Clara dress. Lily ran in circles getting underfoot until one of the ranch hands was assigned to keep her occupied. Guests began arriving before noon, their wagons and horses filling the yard. Clara stayed hidden in her room, tradition dictating that Elijah not see her before the ceremony. She listened to the sounds of celebration beginning below music and laughter and felt her heart pounding with anticipation. When Martha finally declared her ready, Clara looked at herself in the mirror one last time. The woman who had stood on that auction block in Denver City was gone forever. In her place was someone new, someone stronger, someone who had found her place in the world. "It is time," Martha said. Clara nodded. She picked up the small bouquet of wildflowers Lily had gathered that morning and walked to the door. The ceremony was held on the hill behind the house, the same hill where Elijah's parents had married 40 years before. A simple wooden arch had been erected, decorated with ribbons and flowers. Rows of chairs held guests who rose as Clara appeared, but she saw none of them. Her eyes were fixed on the man waiting at the altar. Elijah Stone, dressed in a dark suit that made him look almost civilized, his beard neatly trimmed, his gray eyes shining with emotion. He watched her approach with an expression of such love, such wonder, that Clara felt tears threatening to fall before she even reached him. Lily walked ahead of her, scattering flower petals with more enthusiasm than precision. The crowd chuckled at her earnest concentration, but Clara barely noticed. She was walking toward her future, walking toward the rest of her life. When she reached the altar, Elijah took her hands in his. His palms were warm and calloused, familiar now beloved. "You are beautiful," he whispered. "You are not so bad yourself." The minister, a kindly older man who had known the Stone family for decades, began the ceremony. He spoke of love and commitment, of the bonds that joined two people into one. He spoke of the trials this couple had already faced and overcome, and the strength that promised for their future. Then it was time for the vows. Elijah went first, his deep voice carrying across the assembled guests. "Clara, 4 months ago you stood on an auction platform in Denver City, and I thought I was buying a caretaker for my niece. Instead, I found a partner, a friend, a love I never knew I was missing." He paused, his voice roughening with emotion. "You saw through my walls when everyone else saw only a wanted man. You believed in my innocence when I had almost stopped believing it myself. You gave me back my family, my home, my name. You gave me back myself. I vow to spend every day of the rest of my life earning your love. I vow to protect you, provide for you, cherish you above all others. I vow to be the husband you deserve, even when I fall short, even when I fail." His eyes were bright with unshed tears. "I love you, Clara. Today, tomorrow, forever." Clara's hands were shaking as she spoke her own vows. "Elijah, 4 months ago I was a woman with nothing, no family, no home, no hope. I stood on that platform expecting to be sold to a stranger who would use me and discard me. Instead, I found you." Her voice broke, and she took a moment to compose herself. "You did not see merchandise when you looked at me. You saw a person. You gave me respect when I expected contempt. You gave me kindness when I expected cruelty. You gave me a home when I expected servitude." She squeezed his hands tightly. "You taught me that I have value, that my thoughts and opinions matter, that I am worthy of love not despite my circumstances, but because of who I am. I vow to stand beside you through whatever storms may come. I vow to be your partner in all things, your supporter, your challenger when you need it, your comfort when you seek it." The tears were falling freely now, but Clara did not care. "I love you, Elijah Stone. I have loved you since the night of the storm when you trusted me with your secrets. I will love you until my last breath and beyond." The minister smiled at them both. "By the power vested in me by the Montana Territory, I now pronounce you husband and wife. Elijah, you may kiss your bride." Elijah pulled her close and kissed her deeply thoroughly, while the crowd erupted in cheers and applause. When they finally broke apart, both breathless Lily came running up to throw her arms around them both. "Now we are a real family," she shouted. "Now we are a real family." Elijah confirmed, lifting her into his arms so that all three of them were embraced together. Clara looked at her husband, at her daughter in all but blood, and felt complete in a way she had never imagined possible. This was her family. This was her home. This was everything. The celebration lasted well into the night. There was food and drink and abundance, music from a fiddle player and an accordion dancing under the stars. Clara danced with Elijah, with Lily, with what seemed like every man at the party, while her new husband watched with amused possessiveness. When the last guest finally departed and Lily was safely tucked into bed, Clara and Elijah retired to their bedroom, the room that had belonged to his parents, that would now belong to them. Candles had been lit on every surface, casting warm golden light across the space. Fresh flowers perfumed the air. The bed had been made with new linens, a wedding gift from Martha Chen. Clara stood in the center of the room, suddenly nervous. This was their wedding night. She knew what was expected, what was coming. She had read enough to understand the mechanics, even if she had no practical experience. Elijah came to stand behind her, his hands gentle on her shoulders. "We do not have to rush anything," he said softly. "We have the rest of our lives. I want this." Clara turned to face him. "I want you. I am just nervous." She nodded, feeling foolish. "I have never—" "I know." He cupped her face in his hands. "We will go slowly. If you want to stop at any point, we stop. No questions asked." "What about you?" Elijah smiled. "I have waited 8 years for my life to begin again. I can wait as long as you need." But Clara did not want to wait. She wanted to give herself to this man who had given her everything. She wanted to seal their bond in the most intimate way possible. She reached up and began unbuttoning his shirt. His breath caught. "Clara." "Shh." She met his eyes. "I want this. I want you. Now show me what it means to be your wife." What followed was more beautiful than Clara had ever imagined. Elijah was gentle, patient, attentive to her every response. He made her feel cherished, worshipped, desired. When they finally came together, there was a moment of pain, but it passed quickly, replaced by something far more profound. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the rumpled sheets, her head on his chest, his arm around her shoulders. "I did not know it could be like that," Clara whispered. "Neither did I." Elijah pressed a kiss to her hair. "I had forgotten what it was to feel anything at all. You woke me up, Clara. You brought me back to life. We brought each other back." They made love again before dawn and again in the early morning light. By the time they finally emerged to face the new day, Clara felt transformed. She was not just a wife now. She was a woman fully claimed, fully known, fully loved. And she would not have changed a single moment of the journey that had brought her here. The months that followed the wedding were the happiest of Clara's life. She fell into the rhythms of ranch life with surprising ease. She managed the household, oversaw the domestic workers, kept the books that tracked the ranch's finances. Elijah consulted her on every major decision, valuing her sharp mind and practical wisdom. Lily thrived under their care. The little girl who had once been silent and withdrawn was now a whirlwind of energy and curiosity. She helped with chores, played with the ranch dogs, rode her pony across the meadows with increasing skill. She called Elijah Papa Eli and Clara Mama Clara, and neither of them ever corrected her. Stone Creek Ranch prospered. Elijah hired competent men, invested wisely in breeding stock, and began restoring the herd to its former glory. Neighbors who had once whispered about the scandal now stopped by for coffee and advice. The Stone name, once tainted by false accusations, was being rebuilt through hard work and honest dealing. Clara started a small school in one of the outbuildings, teaching Lily and the children from neighboring ranches to read and write and do arithmetic. It was what she had always dreamed of, teaching young minds, shaping futures. That her own daughter was among her students made it even sweeter. And through it all, her love for Elijah deepened. They talked for hours each evening, sharing thoughts and dreams and fears. They laughed together, worked together, built a life that was stronger than either of them could have created alone. 6 months after their wedding, Clara discovered she was pregnant. She had suspected for weeks, but she waited until she was certain before telling Elijah. She found him in the barn one evening, brushing down his horse after a long day of work. "I have something to tell you." He looked up immediately, concerned. "Is everything all right?" "Everything is perfect." Clara took his hand and placed it on her still flat belly. "We are going to have a baby." Elijah stared at her, his expression shifting from confusion to wonder to overwhelming joy. He fell to his knees, pressing his face against her stomach, his shoulders shaking. Clara realized he was crying. "Elijah, a baby." His voice was muffled against her dress. "Our baby. Are you happy?" He looked up at her, and she saw tears streaming down his weathered cheeks. The last time she had seen him cry was the day he was cleared of all charges. But these were different tears. These were tears of pure, uncontained joy. Happy does not begin to describe it. He rose and pulled her into his arms. "I love you so much, Clara. I love you more than I have words to say." They held each other in the barn, surrounded by the smell of hay and horses, and Clara felt her heart overflow with gratitude for everything that had led her to this moment. The pregnancy progressed without complications. Clara grew round and radiant, her happiness visible in every gesture. Lily was ecstatic about the prospect of a baby sibling, asking daily when the baby would arrive and whether it would be a boy or a girl. Life was peaceful. Life was good. Until the night the past came back to haunt them. It was late winter, 7 months into Clara's pregnancy. The baby was due in less than a month, and Clara had been confined to rest by the ranch doctor's orders. She spent her days in the comfortable chair by the fire, reading and sewing and waiting. Elijah had been away for 3 days, traveling to Helena to finalize some business dealings. He was expected back the following morning. Clara missed him terribly, but she was not worried. The ranch was well protected with loyal workers who kept watch through the night. She was just about to go to bed when one of the ranch hands burst through the door. Mrs. Stone. His face was pale, his eyes wild with fear. "There is trouble. Thomas Webb. He has escaped from prison." Clara felt the blood drain from her face. Webb had been sentenced to hang, but the execution had been delayed by legal appeals. He had been held in the territorial prison in Deer Lodge, awaiting the final decision of the appeals court. "When did this happen?" 3 days ago. The word just reached us. He killed 2 guards getting out." The hand's voice was shaking. "And Mrs. Stone? They think he is heading this way." Clara's hand went to her belly, instinctively protective. She thought of Lily asleep upstairs. She thought of the child growing inside her. She thought of everything she had to lose. Send riders to find Elijah, tell him what has happened, and bring all the men inside. We are locking down the house. The next hour was controlled chaos. The workers were brought in armed and positioned at windows and doors. Lily was woken and brought to Clara's room, confused and frightened, but trusting that the adults knew what they were doing. Clara paced, despite the doctor's orders, her mind racing through possibilities. Webb was a desperate man, a man with nothing left to lose. He had vowed revenge. He would not stop until he had it. She checked and rechecked the rifle that Elijah had taught her to use. She would not be helpless. She would not let this monster take anything else from them. The attack came just before dawn. It started with the sound of gunfire from the barn, shouts, screaming horses, then flames leaping up against the dark sky as someone set fire to the outbuildings. In the confusion, no one saw Webb slip around to the back of the house. No one saw him Jimmy open the kitchen window. No one knew he was inside until Clara heard the creak of footsteps in the hallway. She grabbed her rifle and positioned herself between the bedroom door and the bed where Lily cowered. The door burst open. Thomas Webb stood there thinner and wilder than she remembered, prison clothes hanging off his frame, a knife glinting in his hand. "Well, well." His voice was a rasping snarl. "The little mail-order bride? Where is your husband, Mrs. Stone?" "He is not here." "I know." Webb stepped into the room, his eyes darting to Lily on the bed. "That is why I waited. I have been watching this place for days, waiting for my moment. You will not hurt us." Clara's voice was steady despite her terror. "The men will be here any moment. Your men are busy with the fire." Webb laughed a horrible sound. "By the time they realize I am in here, you will all be dead." He lunged toward Lily. Clara did not hesitate. She raised the rifle and fired. The bullet caught Webb in the chest, stopping him mid-stride. He looked down at the spreading stain of blood with an expression of pure surprise. "You shot me," he said, as if he could not quite believe it. Clara did not respond. She cocked the rifle again, hands trembling, but aim steady. Webb took one stumbling step forward, then another. Then his legs gave way, and he collapsed to the floor. He was still breathing, but barely. Footsteps pounded up the stairs. The bedroom door flew open again, and this time it was friendly faces. Ranch hands, weapons drawn, staring in shock at the scene before them. "Mrs. Stone, are you all right?" Clara lowered the rifle. "I am fine. Lily is fine. But we need the doctor, and someone needs to secure this man before he bleeds out." "Let him bleed," one of the hands muttered. "No." Clara's voice was firm. "He will face justice. Proper justice. I will not become a killer even to end him." They tied Webb's wounds and bound his hands while Clara sank into a chair, suddenly exhausted. The adrenaline was fading, leaving her shaky and drained. Lily crawled into her lap, burying her face against Clara's shoulder. "You saved me, Mama Clara. I will always save you, sweetheart. I will always protect you." They sat there together, mother and daughter, while outside the sun rose over Stone Creek Ranch and the fire was slowly extinguished. Elijah arrived 4 hours later, having ridden through the night when the message reached him. He burst through the door wild-eyed and terrified, and did not stop until he had Clara and Lily both in his arms. "I thought I had lost you," he said, his voice breaking. "When I heard Webb had escaped—" "We are fine." Clara held him close. "We are all fine." He pulled back to look at her, his hands cradling her face. "They told me what you did. You shot him. I had no choice. He was going to hurt Lily. You are extraordinary." Elijah pressed his forehead against hers. "You are the bravest woman I have ever known. I am a mother." Clara smiled despite her exhaustion. "I did what any mother would do." Webb survived his wound, though barely. He was taken back to prison under heavy guard, and this time there were no delays. He was hanged 2 weeks later, his appeals exhausted, his crimes finally and fully punished. Clara did not attend the execution. Neither did Elijah. They had moved on from Thomas Webb, from the darkness he represented. Their focus now was on the future, specifically on the baby that was coming. 3 weeks after Webb's final end, Clara went into labor. It was a difficult birth. Hours of pain, of exhaustion, of fear that something would go wrong. Elijah paced outside the bedroom door, barely restrained from breaking it down every time Clara cried out. But finally, as the sun set over the mountains, a baby's cry pierced the air. Thomas Jeremiah Stone came into the world red-faced and screaming, a healthy 8 pounds, with his father's gray eyes and his mother's determined chin. Clara held him against her chest, tears streaming down her face, and felt her heart expand to accommodate this new and overwhelming love. Elijah was allowed in moments later. He stood frozen in the doorway, staring at the small bundle in Clara's arms. "Come meet your son," Clara said softly. He approached the bed as if in a dream. When Clara placed the baby in his arms, Elijah looked down at the tiny face with an expression of such wonder, such reverence, that Clara started crying all over again. "He is perfect," Elijah whispered. "He is ours." Lily was brought in next, bouncing with excitement. She climbed onto the bed and peered at her new brother with wide eyes. "He is so small. He will grow." Clara stroked her daughter's hair. "And you will help us take care of him, will you not? I will be the best big sister ever." Clara looked at her family gathered around her, her husband strong and steady cradling their newborn son, her daughter bright-eyed and eager already planning all the things she would teach her baby brother. This was her life. This was her home. This was everything she had ever wanted and never dared to dream she could have. 1 year later, Clara stood on the hill behind the house, the same hill where she had married Elijah, the same hill where they had renewed their vows on their first anniversary. In her arms, baby Thomas gurgled contentedly, reaching for the flowers that nodded in the summer breeze. Below her, the ranch spread out in all its glory. The rebuilt barn, the new outbuildings, the cattle grazing in the distant pastures, workers moving about their tasks, life happening in all its ordinary, extraordinary ways. Elijah appeared beside her, Lily riding on his shoulders. He wrapped an arm around Clara's waist and pulled her close. "What are you thinking about?" "The auction," Clara said quietly. "The day you bought me? That was a lifetime ago. It was less than 2 years." She turned to look at him. "Sometimes I cannot believe how much has changed. Do you regret any of it?" Clara considered the question. She thought about the fear she had felt on that platform, the uncertainty of those first days in the cabin, the danger they had faced, the truths they had uncovered, the enemies they had defeated. She thought about the love that had grown between them, fragile at first, then stronger and stronger, until it had become the foundation of everything they had built. "Not a single moment," she said. "Every step of the journey brought me here. To you, to our children, to this life." Elijah kissed her soft and sweet. "I love you, Mrs. Stone." "I love you too, Mr. Stone." Lily made a gagging sound from her perch on his shoulders. Kissing again. "You two are always kissing." They laughed together, and baby Thomas laughed too, not understanding the joke, but wanting to be part of the moment. Clara looked at her family, at the home they had built, at the future that stretched before them bright and promising. She thought about the woman she had been standing on that auction block, worthless in the eyes of the world. She was not worthless now. She was not alone. She was not afraid. She was Clara Stone, wife, mother, partner, equal. She had been sold for $150, but she had found something beyond price. She had found love. She had found purpose. She had found home. And that, she thought, as the sun began its slow descent toward the mountains, was the greatest fortune of all. The woman who had been purchased on an auction block in Denver City was gone forever. In her place stood someone stronger, someone braver, someone who had survived the worst and emerged into the light. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new joys, new moments to share with the people she loved. The ranch would continue to grow. The children would continue to thrive. The love between her and Elijah would continue to deepen in ways she could not yet imagine. But tonight on this hill, where so many important moments had occurred, Clara simply stood with her family and watched the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and pink and purple. She was exactly where she was meant to be. She was home, and she would never leave again. As darkness fell and the first stars appeared, Elijah lifted Lily from his shoulders and took Thomas from Clara's arms. "Time for bed, little ones," he said. They walked down the hill together, 4 figures silhouetted against the fading light. At the door of the house, Clara paused and looked back at the land that stretched behind them. She thought about her parents, long gone but not forgotten. She thought about the journey that had brought her across a continent to this place. She thought about every moment of fear and doubt and despair that had somehow impossibly led to joy. "Thank you," she whispered to whatever force had guided her path. "Thank you for bringing me here." Then she turned and followed her family inside, closing the door on the past and opening her heart to the future. The story of Clara Bennett, the woman bought at auction, was over. The story of Clara Stone, beloved wife and mother, was just beginning. She had come to the mountains as a virgin bride purchased by a stranger for $150. She had found a mountain man who saw her worth when no one else could. Together they had built something that would last for generations. The virgin bride had become a wife, a mother, a partner. The mountain man had become a husband, a father, a pillar of the community. And their love, forged in adversity and strengthened by trial, had become the foundation of a legacy that would endure long after they were gone. And it would be magnificent.